Welcome to True and Unpolished, the podcast, a Cusp culture production. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, inspire, and amuse.
Let's get authentic. Hello, everybody. It's Lydia here with True and Unpolished. You are about to listen to a conversation that Mary and I have with Susan Yelverton about embracing and practicing self-compassion. I found this conversation to be so helpful, and I know that you will find it helpful too. She gives tips and kind of steps for embracing this self-compassion that you'll be able to take with you and practice right away. Take a listen. Okay, Susan, tell us your story.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me. And I'm honored to be working with y'all today and talking to you. And pleased to be one of Mary's Peeps. In the legion of Peeps that she has. And,
y'all are awesome. Mary's Peeps. I kind of feel like I'm one of Mary's Peeps also.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you are one of my Peeps, but Susan is such a fun person to be around. I mean, and so bright and so joyful.
Yeah, such a light. I'm so excited that you're here too. So excited.
Well, I was trying to think about the story to tell, so I'm going to try and tell the story of my relationship with mindfulness, and most recently a part of mindfulness that I'm discovering called self-compassion, which I would love to go back and give to my former self 10 years ago when I was at the beginning of my, honestly, I would love to go back and be the self-compassion fairy and sprinkle it all through my life. But I guess probably about between 12 and 15 years ago, I got really interested in mindfulness through making bead bracelets. And I started reading about faith traditions that involved meditation and mantras, and kind of concurrent with that happening, my stepdaughter Sophie has something called Angelman Syndrome, which is a chromosome deletion on the 15th chromosome. It's pretty rare, but if you kind of look up the primary facet of Angelman Syndrome is those children are particularly happy. That's sometimes how you know a child has Angelman Syndrome. They smile a lot very early on and are happy and laugh, and I just had this wonderful, the universe gave me these two beautiful gifts at the same time, which was as my daughter got older and I got to know her better, and as I read more about meditation and Buddhism and Eastern religions, I was hearing the same story told different ways.
Yes.
And last week, on your last, I think, podcast, you were talking about like the confirmation bias that some people have of, that Mary talks about, the prover, that part that looks for things. And Sophie, my daughter, just kind of, she assumes everyone is her friend. And children with Angelman Syndrome have real impact in cognition and don't have a lot of short-term memory, which makes her a really good forgiver.
Yes.
She forgives quickly and will go and hold hands with people in public places that she's never met before. And
she gives the best hugs.
She is really intense hugger and just a professional. And every year, for many years, we gave an Angelman awareness walk in Columbia, and there needed to be always someone that would prevent the children from hugging the people who weren't at the park for the walk, because they
I love it.
But the miracle for me was watching people respond to her when she saw the good in them. Yes. You know, people that were like irritated and in a hurry, and when she would reach out for them and smile and hold her hand or just giggle at them, just to see that, to be a witness to that, really kind of, I think, opened my heart in a way that I was able to kind of take in information about mindfulness. And started meditating. And then what, of course, arose, as is frequently the case, was some really inconvenient information
Yeah.
that I like intentionally not wanted to hear, which is that I needed to change jobs. And so I went back to school to be a therapist, and then had the wonderful fortune of doing my internship with Mary at a mental health center here in town. And I remember I was interning there, and Mary was returning to the program. She'd been there before, but she was like the famous Mary, the art therapist and DBT. Famous. Yeah, the famous Mary. And they kept saying, wait till Mary gets here. Mary is great at DBT, and she's got this art. And so I remember meeting her, and I was about to go, as a part of my schooling, I was about to go to Vietnam to visit a Buddhist monastery with a professor. And it was amazing. She uses what she knows about social work to help the monks in Vietnam do social work provision to people who come to the monastery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was great. And part of that was going to be to maybe see some faith healing that the monks did. And I remember saying that to Mary, and I'd said it to several people, and people have been like, what?
Yeah.
And I said it to Mary, and I felt like I gave a disclaimer. I was like, this is a little weird, but this is what and Mary was like, oh girl, I'm totally into that. And I was like, you are my new friend. I already know it. And so I felt so good. And she has just held me with such acceptance and love, and has been such a teacher for me. And so I think that's what, and this is why we wanted to have you on, is I think
so that you would tell us that about Mary.
Right. That's exactly right.
You can Venmo me my $100. Yeah, later.
Well, our teachers are also our students, and our students are also our teachers. And I think that is one of the beautiful things about this friendship, is that we've done that for each other. Yeah. And sometimes not even knowing, it's not even intentional. It's just sort of happening organically.
Yeah.
And that to me is when the best learning happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you are now on your way to Vietnam to possibly see faith healing in the story?
Well, that was, I guess maybe 2014, 13, 14. So I did get to see that. And then Mary and I got to work together in the DBT program. And I went from being kind of a meditation doer very quickly to a mindfulness leader.
Yeah.
And maybe had some imposter syndrome, like, I'm not ready to do this yet. I'm still learning myself. But since then, I've worked in a hospital system doing mental health care, but always with a focus on mindfulness.
Oh, that's wonderful. And in my experience, we teach what we most need to learn. I mean, that, and so it's such a, we're teaching and learning in every moment. I mean, that is my experience too. Like I am, my title is, spiritual leader, which is minister equivalent. And I've been given special dispensation while I'm actually going to school to be credentialed for it. So I'm actually doing the thing that I'm being taught to do simultaneously. So I completely relate to that, and the recognition that, and the teaching is so helpful to my learning,
Right.
Yeah. I think you don't know it. And I was a teacher before. I was a public school theater educator. So I think teaching is my orientation.
Love that.
And so it made sense that for me as a young person, theater was a safe place that helped me kind of try on other people. Yes. And that mindfulness has been a safe place for me to try on myself.
Oh.
And I had to do first one, I think, and then the other.
So beautiful.
That's a really great way to say it.
Yeah, can you say that again? Because I did
okay.
theater. Theater was my great love. So say it again. Say it one more time. Theater.
So in theater, we have the opportunity to try on different people, to learn empathy by trying on different personalities, roles. But we need a safe place for that in order to do it, the art. And then in therapy and in mindfulness, we're trying to create a safe space so that we can try on ourselves, that we can kind of return to the self. And I know that y'all said something in your last podcast about that if you have skinny jeans on and your hair is part of the side, I think, and you use the laughing crying. And so I'd done all of those. When I saw, I was like, oh gosh, there's me. But
me too.
in the middle part of our life, I think we need to tick off all the stuff that we put on for other people. And so I think mindfulness is a real important piece of that, to sit with what's essential.
And it's such a vulnerable time, because in my experience, here at midlife, it really is. I've taken it all off, and now it's like, here I am. And, there is this vulnerable piece to it. And it's almost like I needed 40 years to get the courage to do this, to really go, well, who is this girl anyway? Who is this gal anyway? Yeah. And this is where I'm guessing your self-compassion piece kind of comes in.
Yes. And I guess when I started teaching meditation, as much as I was doing it myself, where Mary and I worked, and then through the hospital system, I just kept hearing more and more people saying, I'm just not good at this. Like, mindfulness was so personally helpful to me. Yeah. And so I wanted to be a vehicle through which it came to people, but I was hearing over and over again, like, I'm not good at it. I can't clear my mind or something. And I totally related to it, because when we sit down, that's usually the first thing that kind of comes up is
that's right.
all the stuff that we've been running from. And I related to that kind of self-aversion. And, I see so many people in private practice now that really struggle with, like, going to sleep, not because sleep is an issue, but those minutes between when you put your phone down and you turn your light out. And when you go to sleep, those are such scary minutes, because there's nothing except for you and your thoughts. And so to ask people to do that on purpose it's a real big request. And
and shout out right now to all the people listening that practice this, because it takes great courage to do this, to really be willing to be alone with your thoughts. And that's where that compassion for yourself, I call it kindfulness, because the recognition is, as soon as you start with this mindfulness, as soon as you become aware of these thoughts, right behind it is the judgment for having them, and that's what takes us away from mindfulness.
Yes.
What do you think, Mare?
Well, I think that is a really nice way to say it. And I think that is true. I also think for me, I had so much internal suffering, pain, that there wasn't another way. So once I found out about mindfulness, and I think that's kind of what Susan was saying too, but once I found out about it, I knew that there wasn't another way.
It's not a choice. Right.
Yeah. Right. So, as far as the courage, I think for me, the pain was too severe to be able to stay where I was without it.
Yeah. Sure. And I think our soul gets to a place where we can't go back. Once we know, we can't unknow it. So we can pause it. We can pause mindfulness for a minute, and then I guess that's where I would say the courage piece comes back in, because you got to go, okay, I'm going to go back to the pillow. I'm going to go back to the washing the dishes and watching those thoughts and being with them,
chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do think we get like that fierce grace sometimes of pain or difficulty that kind of tenderizes us, especially to be open for it. As my therapist always says, you didn't do it before because you couldn't do it. But now you can
right.
do it.
Right.
And
that's what Maya Angelou says, until you know better, you don't do better. And then when you know better, you do better. So I'm curious, Susan, how do you describe, or what would you say the payoff to mindfulness is? Like what's the payoff? What's on the other side of it?
I can only, I guess, speak from my own experience that that freedom.
Yes.
Right. No biggie, but like freedom, and not probably like this consistent like running through the streets,
right?
Naked freedom, but just a little bit more space between me and my thoughts, and more space between me and my behaviors, and just the wisdom of knowing that I'm not my thoughts, and thank goodness, because they are weird.
Yeah.
They are.
I say it all the time. You don't want to be in here. Like, you don't want to be in here.
And I don't take it as seriously. I don't engage in my judgments anymore. Like, they have come straight from God to me, and here's the truth about myself. And I guess that the self-compassion piece of it has been really important to me, because if we're willing to sit quiet and allow what arises to arise, but the energy that meets that is super judgy or mean, then we are not going to do it. We're just not going to do it. Yeah.
Well, I think even as a mindfulness teacher, and I've been teaching this stuff for a long time, and I really do practice what I teach.
Yes.
And I think all three of us do that.
Yes.
So I think right now I'm having a very vulnerable moment in my life, and I have those periodically, just like anybody. So there's a lot of I wouldn't say hatred, but maybe strong dislike, so, or struggling with being just really hard on myself right now. So, and I think that is true for a lot of people with the way that life has slowed down so much in the last year. Yes. So what do you suggest to work on self-compassion as a mindfulness practice? What strategies or tips do you suggest to people to work on self-compassion?
Thank you for that question, because I want to kind of maybe give a little copyright and disclose where I've gotten all this information from. Is I did a mindfulness teacher training for a couple years that was led by Tara Brock and Jack.
Yes.
And as part of that, and it was just wonderful, and I wanted more information about teaching, and they just offered us so much information. But one of the people that kind of came in as a guest was Kristen Neff, and self-compassion that's her thing. That's her real focus, she and Chris Germer. And so when I heard her talk about taking the self-compassion break, and I'll tell you exactly, because I wrote down the parts of it so I wouldn't forget.
Yeah, tell me. Self-compassion break. Love it.
The self-compassion break is that we take the hard, painful thing, Mary, what you were kind of talking about, a time where you're being particularly hard on your, just this, whatever it is.
Self-loathing or shame, judgment, whatever it is. Yeah.
I'm just tired of myself. It's
like so over me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second part of it is like imagining that me or Lydia or one of your other peeps came to you and said, hey, this is happening in my life. And you probably wouldn't then say, well, you should, I know you wouldn't, because this has happened. Right. I've brought you my suffering, and you have not said, well, I'm a little tired of you, Susan.
That's right.
Yeah.
Get over your suffering.
Yeah. But to kind of conceive how you would treat this dear friend,
Yes.
all the things, just so that you can think of it tangibly. And then her first step says that you say in some, whatever words are meaningful to you, this is a moment of suffering for me. I am suffering. Or this really sucks, or ow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's validating it. It's like validating that this is happening to you. You are suffering. I am suffering. Yeah. Got it. This is a moment of suffering for me.
I'm suffering right now. And that's kind of, and then in that moment, and she talks about that normally, that in that moment, we wouldn't even think about the suffering piece. We would just judge ourselves.
Yeah.
And so instead of judging ourselves, to kind of hold ourselves gently, like we would hold a pal or a friend, to say, you're suffering, like think about the tenderest, tiniest little animal or something like that, and imagine ourselves holding us in our suffering in that gentle way, and to kind of come up with whatever language. Here I am, this is me suffering. And that's the self-kindness versus self-judgment, she says, is the first piece. And then the second piece is thinking a thought along the lines of, when I feel this way, I join everybody else in suffering. Maybe their suffering isn't just like this, but everybody suffers, but not in a way to invalidate ourselves, but to, I know that for me, I suffer most in the second place, because I will tell myself, like, well, you should know better.
Right.
You tell people this all day long.
Me too.
What the hell is wrong with you? Yeah. And so, and so kind of relaxing into, I'm suffering because I'm a person and we suffer. And so that kind of common humanity versus feeling really isolated. I learned the great term when I worked in substance use and addiction, and the idea that we can feel like we are terminally unique, that I'm different, which is great when you're different good, but is really not great when you're different bad, and so so she says the second piece is common humanity versus isolation. And then the third piece is imagining what you would need, what kindness. And I mean, I think, Mary, when we were talking before, I think you're already doing this, which is how, what does that little hurt piece need? And then to do it for yourself, to do, to love your, to hold your, and in their trainings, there's a lot of like embodied, like physical hugging of self, or patting or holding, or
Susan's putting her hands over her face right
now.
Just
our hand on heart. And I can say that in my experience, I've been doing a lot of work on really, trying to embody my life. And at first it was very difficult for me to hug myself, or to, put my hand on my heart. And, one of the things that I would just invite people to do is just be curious about that. Don't judge that. Just be curious, like, oh, isn't this interesting that I find it hard to hug myself, or I find it hard to do that. Just doing that even opens me up to compassion, like, oh, she can't hug herself, and that was helpful for me. But I love that. So can you say the steps again? There were 3 steps, right? Have we, or is there another step?
No, that's the first one is recognizing that it's a moment of suffering.
Yeah.
In whatever way you want to. And the second is recognizing that this is a part of life, and it's human to feel this way.
Yes.
There's not something specially wrong or broken.
Yeah.
And that the third part is kind of expressing care or concern in whatever way that you need. All of us are different, and really kind of listening to that hurt part. And if that hurt part wants some juice, go get that hurt part some juice. And if that hurt part wants a hug, Give
Yeah.
yourself a
Well, I
hug.
did. I went into the health food store and got a bunch of organic fruit. I was gonna buy. They had a juice bar, but it was closed down. So I was gonna go get them to make me a juice. Plus, I was gonna buy a bunch of fruits and vegetables. I just ended up with the fruits and vegetables, but I have a juicer, and I made myself a tall glass of fresh juice.
Yes.
Yeah.
That felt really good.
And before we started this, we acknowledged that the universe was actually, looking out for Mare, because she's, you guys last week, I think it was last week, we talked about the pause, and Mary is in a pause. Is it okay that I said that, Mary? We can edit it out if not. But Mary's in a pause, and I think that she needed a doing, because sometimes in the pause we need to chop wood, carry water. So she got, instead of having somebody make her juice, she's making it. And conversely, 2 days ago for me, I'm working through some really heavy emotional stuff right now. And what I did was I went and had someone wash my hair and blow it out. And then I went and got a pedicure. And I haven't done those things in a long time. And I have to say that I did not immediately feel better. I was very down when I did this, and I did not immediately feel upbeat. But I can say that the next day I did. So that self-care, that level of, hey, Lydia, I love you, and I'm gonna go let somebody else pamper you and take care of you. The payoff did arrive the next day. I could feel the uplift, So maybe don't get down on ourselves if that self-care, self-compassion takes a little while for it to reach our heart space.
It's like the DBT skill, Mary, that I think you've taught me, of opposite to emotion action, is that sometimes putting yourself in the way of joy, it may not immediately sink in, but I think that the kind of the relationship between ourself and ourself, to do like some internal family system stuff, like we've got that a pusher part of us that pushes us through life, and the part that's really hurt. And there's a lot of distrust, I think, sometimes between our hurting part and the part of us that says, you just got to push through. You just got to move on. And that's where a lot of anxiety comes from. The hurting part knows it's never going to quit hurting. There's always going to be pain. But if that pusher part doesn't stop and turn around and pay attention and say, honey, I see you. Like Thich Nhat Hanh says, darling, I care about your suffering. And that's what he says to himself. And the first time I read that, I was like, that's crazy talk. You call yourself darling? Like, I call myself some things, but it's
well, he is the sweetest. So.
He is.
Yeah.
And I really have taken, on some of his language. And this reminds me of, I was listening to two gals, they're twins. They co-wrote a book, and I'm not going to go too much into it now, but one of the things that they talk about is that they read this woman, her name is Kate Mann, and she talks about this cultural, this woman moral obligation, like this moral obligation of a woman is to be pretty and calm and generous. And when we break that rule, and there's nobody around to punish us, then we'll just do it ourselves. Right. And so that pusher part is the part of us that says, hey, no, you've got an obligation here, lady. Like, put on some lipstick, slap on a smile, go on out there, check somebody's mail and feed their cat while they're out of town. Whatever it is. It's that, and there is a, there's a collective consciousness around that, so, oh my gosh, Mary, why do you get the great peeps?
What do you mean? Everybody gets the great peeps.
I can
now.
be your peeps. I'd be happy to be.
Susan, we did have
talking about
a dinner or two. We did have a dinner or two. It might have been a decade ago, but I feel like it sustained us. I mean, we
Yes.
had such a good time that it's carrying us through. So,
Yes,
and just everybody listening, my peeps, I do love you, and you are awesome, because I can feel
Right.
some of my peeps who are listening, like, oh, really? And what am I, chopped liver? Okay. So this, as always, has been an amazing, amazing conversation. I just am so grateful for your presence and consciousness. Like I almost, like, listening to you was a little bit like getting a hug. And so I'm just really grateful. I'm grateful that you would come and share yourself and your light with us. And I can't wait to do it again. See, I'm assuming the sale. I'm assuming you're coming back without even
absolutely asking. Any time. And thank you guys for letting me be on. And if you're listening and you're interested in self-compassion, if you Google up like Kristen Neff or Chris Germer, they have a wonderful website that has lots of resources.
And how about you? If they wanted to find you, are you unfindable? Are you?
I'm not unfindable. I'm in private practice here in Columbia at Live Oak Counseling Center. So
Live Oak Counseling Center.
That's where I am. Yes.
Can we say your last name, Susan?
Yelverton. Yes.
Say it one more time for us.
Susan Yelverton. Yeah.
Susan Yelverton, in private practice there in Columbia, South Carolina, my hometown.
Woot, woot.
Well, it has been wonderful. Everybody, you have been listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.